ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is a common condition in children that can negatively impact their ability to perform in school, their social activities, and their sleep.
And it can cause ongoing anxiety, concern, and questions for their parents.
On this week's Health Talk, ADHD experts will join us to answer some of the most common questions they hear for you.
So stay tuned. We're up next.
Peterson.
And I'm Dr. Eric Mazur. Our guests today are Dr. William Levinson and Marielle Sokola. Dr. Levinson is the Program Director of the Pediatric Development and Therapy Center in Norwalk. He is also Chief of Developmental Pediatrics at Boston Children's Health Physicians at the Maria Ferrari Children's Hospital at New York Medical College. Marielle Sokola is an advanced practice RN. She is a psychiatric nurse practitioner for the Pediatric Developmental Center at Norwalk Hospital. Welcome both to Health Talk.
Well done. Welcome.
You've got to shorten your titles for us for the future.
So many accomplishments. Thanks so much for joining us on the show
Our
today.
pleasure.
So I think we're going to talk, maybe say a couple of words, both of you, about the Pediatric Development and Therapy Center. I know that that's something that's relatively new and is a real resource for this community. And start with you, Bill.
Sure. The Pediatric Development and Therapy Center is through Norwalk Hospital. We're located at the iPark location on Main Ave, and we have a full variety of developmental services for children and the families. We have developmental pediatrics, psychiatric nurse practitioner, psychology, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and with psychology a full complement of testing and therapy psychologists. So we really try to offer families a full range of services when a child needs assistance.
And Maria, how does someone get in contact with the center if they have a child that they want to have evaluated, or is it the doctor that does that?
It can be anyone. It can be a pediatrician who calls us, another medical provider. Most commonly, we have parents who call us with concerns about their child, both for evaluations or children who've already had evaluations, and a parent is looking for therapy.
What a wonderful resource in the area.
Yeah, are there any others like this around? Any other centers like this?
I think we're rather unique in that we have such a wide range of services, and we try to make sure that any family can come. Finances are never an issue.
I know that this was a direct outgrowth of requests from the community to consolidate these services in one place, and it's received a lot of community philanthropic support to allow it to exist and go on. So congratulations. I was working with Dr. Smetak, Vicki Smetak,
Sure.
who I know spent a lot of time getting this going. So and she was also a co-host of our programs for a while. So now we're going to talk about ADHD. That is thrown around a lot. It seems like everybody has ADHD, at least every little boy has ADHD. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it really is and how to identify it and
Sure.
how it's disruptive and get it going there.
Basically, attention deficit is when you can't get your attention span going and maintain it adequately long enough to really get in information. You know, we all have a range to our attention span. Some things will hold our attention span better than others. And in that case, if something isn't quite of interest, you can still focus on it. You can still learn it. It'll still get into the short-term memory. But if that whole range is shifted down, it's only things that really capture your interest that'll capture your attention. And that can be a problem, especially in school.
Well, that's very, so I didn't realize this, but Marielle, so that means that they still could be engaged. Just because your child could be engaged in something doesn't mean that they don't have this disorder.
Right. Parents will commonly say to us, well, my child can play video games or watch TV for hours, so clearly attention is not a problem. This must be a question of motivation or interest, when in fact it's that very problem of being motivated and putting forth effort when things are harder or less interesting.
How do you tease that out?
That's exactly what I was going to ask. How do you separate that from a variant of normal?
Well, when a child comes in for an evaluation, the first thing is to get a pretty complete history. You want to know what that child's difficulties are, how long they've been going on for. You want to know through the family history, is there anyone else who's had difficulties? And then children get a full physical and neurological exam, and we'll then take behavioral rating scale information from the parents, from the child, if the child is old enough, from teachers, to try to get a view of what's that child's attention span like in reality in all those settings. We have some computerized testing which can sometimes measure attention span, and then through psychology testing we can see where the child's learning skills are, because that may impact on attention span. And there are also some measures of attention span that go into psychology testing. So all that information gets put together to give a composite.
So it's not a simple, like a simple blood test. You don't have
Right.
this, and therefore you have
It's
ADHD.
not one simple test.
And Marielle, is there a range of being affected by ADHD that you see?
A range in what way?
In terms of severity of attention issues or behavioral issues from
Definitely.
child to child?
Definitely. More severe ADHD, or the type of ADHD that involves both inattention and hyperactivity and impulsivity, commonly is very noticeable to parents and teachers, and so those children tend to get diagnosed earlier. Whereas a child who maybe has learning issues or is just inattentive and maybe quieter or tends to kind of daydream, those children sometimes don't get noticed until the academic demands increase in middle school and high school.
Do we understand why this is more common in boys than girls?
I don't think that's ever been teased out exactly why it's happening, but boys will outnumber girls about 4 to 1 in attention deficit.
So this isn't, let me just ask, this isn't just being a boy, being made pathology.
It's, up for discovery in the future.
Maybe you could go through, what are the problems the kids have? How do they, when should a parent who's sitting at home begin to worry that their child may have this? And then we should talk about therapy too, because I know we can do things about this. But what are people looking for at home?
Well, usually parents of a preschooler who's very hyperactive, they'll come to us with concerns. In elementary school, even kindergarten, first grade, if a child isn't paying attention enough to learn, the teacher usually alerts the parent that there may be a problem.
And hyperactive, I have 3-year-old grandsons at home. What does a hyperactive 3-year-old look like?
Well,
I always say, because they're so active, I can't imagine them being hyperactive.
Right. I mean, we don't want to squash, a good activity, but some children are hyperactive to the point where they're almost a danger to themselves or others. You might have a 3 or 4-year-old who's aggressively hitting an infant in home, or might climb up on the kitchen cabinets and, want to jump down on the floor. I saw one 3-year-old a few years ago, a single mother. She could hardly go to the bathroom because she couldn't leave her child alone for 2 seconds.
So these are kids that are way
beyond the
normal and actually getting into trouble.
And Marielle, you mentioned, there are some kids when they're younger, things can be noticed by parents, and sometimes things are noticed by teachers. And teachers obviously have greater experience often with a wide variety of children too. So are teachers particularly attuned to being able to say, I'm concerned about this child being maybe outside the norms in terms of attention or activity?
Definitely. We very much depend on teacher reports and teacher feedback in coming up with a diagnosis, and as well as monitoring treatment. Teachers are very well attuned to their students. They see them over the course of many months. They can compare them to other students. So it's very important for us to be collaborating with teachers, and teachers to be giving feedback to parents.
Is there anything that we know that either causes this or a prenatal thing that should be avoided that can prevent ADHD in children?
Well, we do know that premature infants may be at more risk for a variety of developmental problems, attention deficit being one of them. Certainly substance abuse during pregnancy can lead to attention deficit, other developmental problems, but the factor that I see most strongly is when there's a family history of someone else with either an attention problem or a learning problem.
And how do you get at that in the adult population? Because this discussion seems relatively recent, i.e. the last 20 years or so. How do you look back in a family of adults and say, well, that person had a learning problem? Just simply that they weren't good in school, or?
Well, parents can pretty much tell us if they have a parent who had an attention problem, or they may have a sibling who's on medication. Most parents can pretty much reliably tell you that.
Marielle, does it ever go away? Do people ever outgrow this, or is this a permanent problem?
Yeah, there is a proportion of all the children who have the diagnosis who outgrow it in adolescence, and some in adulthood. Some of that, could be maturation of the brain, of the frontal lobe, and other aspects are learning skills to cope with distractibility and to find ways to stay organized and plan, and all the things that are challenges for people with ADHD.
There actually have been large long-term studies done here in the United States, and they've tracked people from elementary school years to young adult years. And if you look at those numbers, if you take a group of elementary age kids with attention deficit, maybe half to 3/4 will still have it during adolescence. During young adult years, maybe 25 to 50% will still have it, which is why we're seeing adults who still have their attention deficit. And just like children may have difficulty in the school's place, adults have difficulty in the workplace and in their personal relationships.
We have less than a minute left. Go ahead, you asked the question.
Remarkably, less than a minute left. Some highlights about treatment and therapy?
Sure. A lot of the families that come to see us, they're looking for medication because they understand that medication can help attention deficit, and that is helpful in a number, of kids. But we also look at what kind of supports do they need in school. What kind of counseling support can be helpful for the children and the families? Are there alternatives to medication? We know that omega-3 fish oils can be helpful. Some families are using neurofeedback. So we try to offer families a wide variety of treatment options, and if the family does opt for medication, we'll monitor them very closely to make sure it's helping and not hurting.
Unfortunately, that's all we have the time for right now.
Thank you both so much.
Andrew and I would like to thank our guests, Dr. William Levinson and Marielle Zacola, APRN, for joining us on Health Talk today.
Please do send us your questions and comments to healthtalk@wchn.org.